we've talked about it in letters, and we've talked about it on the phone, but how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes?
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave. This week, it's the Hollywood Studios year by year. We're going back to RKO, 1932. It will be a Gregory LaCava double feature. We'll be talking about Symphony of 6 Million and Age of Consent.
It's also the beginning of the Selznick era,
Right. Well, it was a short-lived era.
but a very important one.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I found out, looking at the memo book, that it was actually Selznick who convinced whoever the owner of the studios to merge RKO with Pathé.
Right.
And then he took charge of the merged result.
It was created explicitly to take advantage of sound film, so it does not have any silent film history. It's RCA, the radio company. They took over a theater circuit, Keith Orpheum, and were off to the races. But yes, that's one way that a studio can attain instant expanded ground coverage. You just take over another studio.
And Selznick was only there for 2 years, but he brought his personal oversight touch to the productions, to a lot of productions in those 2 years, although he gets the executive producer credit, which he claims to have invented. But obviously, of those films, he only really paid attention to a few of them.
Hepburn ones especially.
Well, according to the Wikipedia page on Symphony of 6 Million, that was definitely one of the ones that he paid personal attention to, although it doesn't get a mention in the memo book. I finally found the editor's note that explains where his text, the biographical text, come from,
The flavor text.
that are at the start of all the separate sections of the memo book written by Selznick, and it, just as one would have thought, it's just compiled from memos and from things he'd written about himself to people who were going to write articles about him. The reason I never found this before is because I have the book on PDF, and it is not that easy to navigate.
No, it's always better to have a nice old-fashioned book in your hand with an index that you can consult.
Unless you absolutely cannot find that book.
That's right. Selznick, he makes frequent appearances on this podcast, but he had started out as a lowly executive trainee at Paramount and jumped over to RKO, where he had this total authority for a couple of years. Then he went over to MGM.
And apparently when he took over RKO, he fired nearly everybody except Pandro Berman. So in a way, you could say he pretty much sets the tone at RKO for the 30s.
Yeah, because Berman is going to step into the Selznick shoes in 34.
After first-hand witnessing the Selznick method, it was Cukor and Selznick who together brought Hepburn to RKO, so Berman is going to happily and unhappily inherit her.
She became a real problem for him, but also someone that he did try everything that he could think of.
This will come back when we do some of the Hepburn RKO movies.
Which I am a huge fan of, and I think that is still somewhat of an unpopular position. A lot of critics still don't have much love for those run-of-the-mill Hepburn RKOs, but I think they're all great.
Well, not Mary of Scotland.
No, that one.
That one you actually agree on.
That's a mess. But no Hepburn in these ones.
So Symphony of 6 Million is the second of the Selznick RKO productions to be released. And as I said, there were many, many in 1932. It is based on a Fannie Hurst novel. Well, not novel, actually, story.
Yes.
Selznick changed the title from Night Bell to Symphony of 6 Million to, I guess, make it more impressive. The Selznick touch, a very, very heavy, it's not like the Lubitsch touch, it's a very, very, very heavy touch, and it is kind of weighing this one down a little bit. Of the two, I did prefer Age of Consent, and they couldn't be more different, although Although their similarity is that they're both taking on, I don't know, strong themes that maybe other studios wouldn't touch.
Yeah, it's an interesting question if either of these could have been made anywhere else. Certainly not exactly the way they were made here, I don't think.
Well, Selznick claims that he insisted on all of the ethnic material, which is, I think, the best part of the movie.
Pretty interesting.
Being kept in from Hurst. And, of course, at the time, as we've unfortunately had occasion to mention many times in this series, nobody could say the word Jewish, practically, almost without exception, at this time, even in the pre-code era. Certainly as the code took hold.
After the code, for sure. After the code began to be enforced.
But obviously, if they could have said it, they would have said it in this movie, because everything else is said. There are entire arcane Jewish rituals that I have never heard of being enacted on the screen here.
Yeah, and they talk about bar mitzvahs.
They say Hebrew, they speak, I think people are speaking in, certainly German, maybe Yiddish.
Yeah, probably Yiddish.
A few different languages, actually.
Mm-hmm. There were a few other movies from this period, like Counselor at Law, right? A Universal, made by William Wyler, and that one is also about a professional who has sort of
sells his birthright for a mess of pottage.
Lost touch with his roots. That's the way they put it.
It's like a classic Jewish story of this period for cinema. I guess maybe a little earlier in literature and drama.
Yeah, the jazz singer, I guess, is the urtext for this, right? And it's the first sound film.
But he doesn't really lose touch with his roots. It's just that his father doesn't think he should be an entertainer.
He's lost touch with his father, that's for sure. And his father's plan for him.
Well, this is a little more complicated version
much more.
So it's relevant to say, because we know this, but maybe you're not inside our heads, that both Selznick and Hurst were Jewish and had familiarity with the kind of background, to some degree, covered in this story.
Yeah, to some degree, for sure.
They wouldn't have been as poor. Selznick's father was a silent film producer and distributor.
Right.
Selznick was, second generation. They were immigrants, his parents, from Lithuania. And Hurst's parents were immigrants from, I think it's Bavaria. Her father owned something or other. Let's see. Well, he was some kind of businessman. But apparently they were, not comfortably middle class. They were struggling.
Right.
And Selznick's father did, I don't know really the details of Selznick's upbringing, but his father did go bankrupt at some point.
But I don't think they ever lived in the Lower East Side in those tenements.
Probably not. Selznick went to Columbia University.
Right. No, probably not.
It's really emphasized here. I mean, the poverty is emphasized, but what's really emphasized is the sense of new immigrants living in an immigrant community and having brought their cultures with them.
The two things go hand in hand, right? And most people that immigrated to the United States around the turn of the century were very poor and did wind up living in the Lower East Side or places like it, all across the Eastern Seaboard especially. But, in all urban areas, most people did wind up living in pretty bad conditions that the city didn't do very much to upkeep. But we do
Moreover, Hurst, it seems, grew up in Ohio and Missouri.
Right, St. Louis.
That would be a very different kind of background. So some kind of familiarity both would have had with this kind of experience, but a lot of it not.
No, a lot of it probably through
research.
Yeah.
For Hurst, that is. A difference between what is shown in this movie, or the approach that this movie takes, to something like a Warner's movie showing the Lower East Side, is it seems more like an ethnographic approach. Doesn't it feel that way? And also very Dickensian at the same time, which feels very Selznick, both of those things.
It's a very different focus. There's no crime here, and we're not looking at people committing violent acts, even though they're under duress or anything. Any terrible things that are happening to the family are happening because they don't have enough money. Medical services are either non-existent or too expensive for most people.
And their particular family seems to be doing sort of okay, but they're surrounded by people who aren't doing as well.
Right, and everyone's just one missed paycheck away from a problem, or one bad health issue away from being completely destroyed.
Yeah.
Which is still the case for
a lot of Americans.
A huge percentage of Americans, yeah.
And quite a few Canadians. So where do you want to start with this one? We could talk about the cast. Ricardo Cortez.
We've seen him before.
We have ironically cast here because he had been portrayed by the studio as a Latin lover. That's why his name was changed. But he was in fact Jacob Krantz from, I don't know, New York City. That's all that they're giving us on Wikipedia.
I mean, he gives a great performance here.
You think so?
I
thought
like him.
I thought the character was a cipher. I mean, toward the end, he actually has some major pathos scenes in which he does come through. But the character, one of the weaknesses of the film is that the character is pretty much of a cipher, the main character. You like this cipher?
I think he did.
Did you agree with me? Did you like Age of Consent better?
It's hard to say. I like them both quite a lot. Probably a little bit better, yeah.
That was definitely the termite art in the room.
Sure. Well, this one is a big deal production, and the other one is clearly nobody in it is a recognizable personality, really. It's a 1 hour movie. I mean, yeah, it's a much lower priority film.
Yeah, I think I'm probably correct in assuming that Selznick interfered less in that. And I did, although I'm a defender of Selznick, he's real hit and miss for me too.
Sure. But this one, I guess part of what impressed me so much about Ricardo Cortez
or Jacob Krantz
is that I've seen him in quite a few 30s films, but he usually plays either a complete cad or an anti-hero at best, someone like Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon. And here he is very stalwart, and
it's kind of basically the story of Superman.
Yeah, he's
and including the part where he gives up his cape because he's failed. You know,
Superman no more, Spider-Man no more.
He takes off his cape. He refuses to be the superhero any longer because he's failed at a major, crucial moment.
For the film to work at all, you do have to find it genuine. His affection for the people that he's helping in his clinic at the beginning, and
you certainly do that.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a very befuddled presence.
Very good at communicating empathy with others, which
actually he's much better at that than at playing a psychopath.
Yeah, probably, but that's what he played most of the time in the movies that I've seen. Now, there are tons that I haven't seen. Maybe this is not the only time he played such a virtuous character, but it was kind of a revelation for me. He is the protagonist, but he's surrounded by
much more colorful characters who
do
more talking.
And the first 10-15 minutes, this is one of those movies where you do spend a lot of time with the characters as children, and we get to know them all quite well through one big scene of the father's birthday and dinner and a chess game gone wild. All the relationships are set up there. The movie is built on very secure foundations from that point, and then we skip ahead to he's a doctor all of a sudden.
Yeah, there's a very long father's birthday scene with all of this family detail. And
Dad, Gregory Ratoff, he's really great in this movie. He's an interesting guy. I don't know if you know him. He kept doing character roles throughout the 30s and 40s and 50s, like he's in All About Eve, but he's also a director.
Oh my god, no, wait, no, he's not the producer, is he? The producer who repeats the line, who always gets indigestion and says, I'm dying.
Yeah.
He's doing the same routine.
Yeah, but I
can't believe that.
He's also a director at Fox. He directed a lot of movies.
Maybe in real life he had some kind of routine that they decided to incorporate in every film.
Maybe he was on vaudeville. I have no idea.
Yeah, maybe. Want to find out? Russian-born. He was in the Moscow Art Theater and in the Yiddish Theater in New York City. So there's your answer.
Okay, so he had a shtick, but this is a very complicated part he's playing here. It's more involved than
It's a very crucial role in All About Eve, but it's a comedy role, strictly.
Yeah, exactly. Now here, he's got to carry a lot of emotional freight, and I think he handles it quite well. The mother was great, too, and I don't know her from anything.
There's no entry on her.
Anna Appel is the actress.
Probably a theater actor, too.
Probably, yeah.
Yiddish theater again, probably.
Not as big of a role as you'd expect, Irene Dunn.
That's the other weakness of the movie. Cipher lead, and what happened to the romantic plot? It's lost.
It comes back in a big big way right at the end.
But those are my two main problems with the movie. Well, also that, and every bit of subtext is completely spelled out in the dialogue.
That's true.
Selznickian over-clarity. And then it's like, it's almost experimental. Like, apparently this is one of the earliest, we saw that Max Steiner did the score, and this is one of the earliest talkies that uses a full and constant musical score, and Selznick pioneered that, was one of the people who pioneered that. A lot of the scenes are played enormously big with this Steiner music, almost like silent movie melodrama music in the background, and it almost becomes like an art theater experiment. But I don't know really how I felt about it. It wasn't going quite far enough to carry me away, other than the operation scene. That fully worked, and it was very innovative in its camera work and the tension that it builds.
Yeah, because it could definitely go either way.
I didn't know. They really had me on the tenterhooks, and we're going to spoil it for you, so stop right now if you want to watch this movie and be on tenterhooks during the operation scene.
Yeah.
The Superman hanging up his cape event. Well, actually, I guess I just gave it away.
The story, we should lay it out a bit more here, just so we can orient ourselves. It's a family in the Lower East Side. The central child, he's actually the younger son. I don't know if he's younger than the daughter, but anyway, there's an older brother, then there's the younger brother who is our protagonist, and there's a sister.
And then there's the quote-unquote crippled girl he's in love with, sort of like Mean Streets. Maybe Scorsese saw this. Maybe Scorsese was influenced by this.
Right. She's maybe born with a congenital spine defect. Anyway, she's going to have trouble with this throughout her life, and I guess there's always a threat that it could completely sink her and kill her, maybe.
I suppose it's possible that she can't have sex or children, and that's what happened to the love story.
Not all of these people set up. The son, Felix, is a genius, right? Like, he can beat his dad without even looking at the chessboard.
He's reading a medical textbook and beating his dad at chess at the same time.
Exactly. And the dad is doting father with like a kind of comic hair trigger temper that doesn't scare anybody.
Exactly like my grandfather.
Yeah, that's right.
I think he might have actually scared his sons, but I don't know. I wasn't there for that.
But this father doesn't, right?
Didn't scare me.
He just blows up, but it's good for a laugh. And, they worry maybe he's going to pop a blood vessel or something. That's the only thing that concerns them when he starts flipping out.
Yeah.
The mother dotes on everybody and, tries to warn her husband when he's overdoing it on the herring, but he does it anyway. As you say, it is a Dickensian kind of setup where people are poor and there are existential threats to their lives. However, everyone kind of finds a way to get along with each other and help each other, right? It's a very feel-good vision of tenement living.
But from the start, the older brother is a bit of a problem. He's a bit of a serpent in the garden. He's the normie.
He's not a bad person.
He's
just someone who has bought into the American dream ideology, and no matter how happy everyone seems to be in the Lower East Side, he understands that the idea is to get out of there.
It's also very, like, the whole movie, this is a really big central conflict throughout the movie, that you genuinely, for all the film's weaknesses of writing and direction perhaps, writing more so.
Yeah, I think the direction is great.
Bold choices, bold directorial choices. You really do feel the conflict of what is the right thing to do here, because the brother is making some good points. Is this father, as his health fails, going to keep working for the rest of his life, and the mother going to keep taking care of the house because she obsessively feels she has to do that?
Right, because Ricardo Cortez grows up, and we skip all
and
of
is the sister going to have no romantic opportunities? So he's really saying what needs to be said, but it's not obvious what to do. It really isn't obvious what to do. So it's really a movie that is infused with a sense of guilt and conflict.
Yeah, because Ricardo Cortez has grown up, and he is now a doctor, basically, when we rejoin him as an adult, and he has decided to focus all of his energy on a free clinic, and he's getting...
That was his reason for becoming a doctor, which is spelled out, that he saw the misery around him, and being a genius, decided this was the way.
Yeah, he's getting one or two paying patients every once in a while, and when he gets that, it's like a complete windfall, and he takes Irene Dunn to Coney Island, or the analog in this film. He's not really bringing in anything substantial to enrich the household. So yeah, it is still basically the parents doing most of the heavy lifting in terms of the household economy. Now, what he's doing for the neighborhood seems to be incalculably valuable.
And everybody loves him, and he loves everybody.
Yeah, and he's got a great bedside manner.
With the hair tousling with the little boys. And
he knows exactly how to get kids to sit through potentially painful operation or adjustment that has to be made if they've got a sprain, just by challenging them not to cry and inventing previous children that didn't cry.
And these parents really are not secretly harboring any resentment or misery over any of this.
No,
We have that scene where the father slips him some extra money, which he's just been doing endlessly whenever he has some extra.
Yeah, and the mother too, right? They both slip him extra money to get a better microscope. So yeah, they think that their job is to give him everything he needs in order to become the best possible doctor and do what he thinks he should with that gift.
They only want, as is made very clear in a later scene, all they want is for their children to be happy.
Presumably this would have gone on forever, but yes, the older brother finds a way to stir the pot.
He doesn't see he keeps saying being a doctor is a business, and he doesn't see any point in having this gift. The point of all gifts is to use them to make money and advance yourself.
And that's not an unreasonable thing to think in a capitalist system, right?
Exactly.
I mean...
But Fannie Hurst isn't a capitalist.
They're all living in capitalist New York, so...
Well, I mean, she is a capitalist in that she made a lot of money from her books and movies in a capitalist system, but not in her political commitments.
Now, he can't get to Felix and convince him that what he's doing is not the right thing to do. He's tried, but it's of no avail. So he goes to the mother and instead takes a sob story angle. The sister is not going to meet any nice young men. She's going to get stuck in a terrible marriage if she has to loiter around the Lower East Side going to cheap movies.
The kind of marriage Dora in the other movie doesn't want.
Right. Eventually, they are going to find themselves in a position where they're going to need some money coming in from other sources. And obviously, this brother is not offering to do any of the heavy work himself.
Although he becomes a successful businessman, so that's interesting. That's kind of an ellipsis, because he does say that he used some of his money to set up his brother in this practice, but I guess he's not successful enough to support the family.
Right. Well, a doctor, the kind of doctor that Ricardo Cortez becomes,
surgeon,
is a much, much higher rent proposition than just being someone who has some kind of a business, right? They don't even say what it is, so it's obviously not Standard Oil.
Maybe we don't see anything of the brother's life at all. Maybe once his brother is on Park Avenue as a doctor, he gets better connections and becomes much more successful in business.
Exactly. At that point, all of the wheels are greased for continual profit, right? But the only way they can crash that circle is through Felix joining the rat race and moving his clinic uptown and getting all the right fixtures and getting in the right clientele, which are portrayed as neurotic.
All useless women.
Yes, so a very Uncle Charlie.
I don't know why. Oh, it's because the husbands, the businessman husbands, just aren't going to the doctor, and they're all going to die young of heart attacks from their smoking and drinking.
Yeah, well, don't forget, I don't think this is a unique trope to this story, right? We saw, not for this podcast, but in the past we've seen King Vidor's The Citadel, and that also was the exact same quandary. It was help people who really need help, or suck in hundreds of thousands of dollars just catering to the neuroses of the idle rich. They're always gendered as women.
What I found funny was that, not the Park Avenue woman, but the middle one, I can't remember where they are at that point, the Uptown clinic, when she's complaining about her vague symptoms. You know, we've seen children with real problems at his Lower East Side clinic, and then we see this woman come in and say, I just don't feel perfectly, and I've got this sore part in the back of my neck, and don't touch it, I have no pain threshold, or the lowest possible pain threshold. And I'm like, that's what my visits to the doctor are usually like.
Sure.
when I get my semi-annual universal health care look over.
Yeah, but don't forget, as you say, yeah, that's universal health care. People didn't go to the doctor for that
If they had a
kind
pain
of
in the
thing.
neck, unless they were fabulously rich.
That's
yes.
right. So there's some logic to it. You can understand how the stereotype developed, but I do think that it's obviously a shorthand that is playing into some misogynist stereotypes.
Well, other than the fact that, yeah, sure, for sure, but it's all women we see at the Lower East Side clinic too. They just are there with their children.
Because certainly in 1932, primarily women would have been taking charge of their children's health.
Yeah.
That's how it worked in those families. So yes. He always feels like this is temporary, and he keeps the clinic open in the Lower East Side, so he's still putting lots of money into it,
But he's one of these protagonists that he doesn't know. There are forces that are driving him that are not his own desires, and he doesn't even know what they are. So that's what I mean by him being a cipher.
Well, we didn't actually mention that the reason he goes there, we did talk about the elder son talking to the mother, but then the mother convinces him
That
after
whole speech.
which is an amazing scene. I mean, her
Why do you think she's crying at the end? Do you think she's crying because
she's manipulating him.
Yeah, but she also has to, even though she's exactly repeating the words of the brother, she must also understand that there is truth in what he said. Otherwise, why would she even be doing this?
She knows that there's some truth in it, but she also knows that it is absolutely not what Felix wants to do.
I started crying when she said that called the apartment smelly or dirty, because you could just tell that she really doesn't believe that.
No,
at
she
all.
loves the apartment and her neighbors. This
Yes.
is her life, and she doesn't consider it a prison. She has made it into something quite wonderful, which we've seen in the film.
Yeah, and they
No.
go, and then, yeah, she has her ladies that she has her coffee clutch with.
That scene is, it's on the same continuum as Stella Dallas pretending to be something she's not so that her daughter will leave her behind,
Sure.
etc. There's a lot of torment there. And yeah, it all comes across. I think it's the best scene in the movie.
Well, that and the son and father scene before the operation.
Yeah. No, there are a lot of good scenes.
With the white glove.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm gonna cry just thinking about it.
So he has been manipulated into this. Now he's trying to make the best of it, and he is certainly doing whatever he can to help these women that come to him. And they seem to be happy with whatever he is providing, although he refuses, so far anyway, to get into facelifts and cosmetic surgery. Although he says, maybe, maybe one day I'll get into that.
Hey,
But-
that's surgery too.
but his heart still is in this idea that he's eventually going to get back to the Lower East Side clinic. In the meantime, though...
But we see his hair go so gray that it's got to be like 10 years passing here
Yeah,
or
sure.
something.
He just can't get back to it. There's always one more appointment with a paying customer. And then he's funneling that money back into the clinic, which is staffed by competent doctors, but none of them have his spark of genius or his bedside manner.
It was pretty cute. His father, we find out that the father is saddened by the fact that he can't spend time with his son anymore. He never
Yeah.
has time to beat him at chess anymore. And that was more valuable to him. It's funny, the movie has a lot of scenes that made me cringe that are just like, oh ha ha, the irony of my situation, I can't believe it, smash a picture, that were not my favorite kind of writing, but it also has these really subtle things, like this realization that the father-son relationship was more important to him than the success or than being able to retire or anything else, right? Sounds very treacly, but it's done in a way that's very effective.
The only people who are unambiguously happy about this are the siblings. The sister seems fine. She gets to marry a nice middle-class or upper-class young man, and they have a baby.
Yeah, despite the fact that she seemed to be a musical genius,
Yeah,
but there's no aspirations for her beyond...
No outlet there.
Wifehood?
Brother, obviously, as we said, does manage to crash business, and things are going well for him.
Maybe in the novel, there's something about her giving up her career. No, this was a short story.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not sure
doubt
how
it.
they even got this giant movie out of it.
Yeah, I think it's probably just the sketch of Doctor struggling to get back to the Lower East Side clinic that he loved or
Right.
something, right? I mean, we haven't read it, so we don't know. Irene Dunn has become also a kind of variation on the Cortez character. She is giving back to the community joyfully. She is teaching a class for the blind, so they're learning basically all subjects, it sounds like, through Braille, and the children love her. And early on, when Cortez Cortez is still living down there. He comes to visit her all the time, and the kids love him. He brings treats for them. They go to the amusement park. All of that, like, it does seem like they are planning to get married at some point, or...
Yes, but we never see we know they're in love with each other. We see that, but we never see even the hint of anything transpiring romantically between them.
No, and you might be right. It may be because she is too frail.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Or they're just too busy.
Like, this is a movie that does the dialogue does a lot of over-explaining, but then some things are really under-explained.
Right.
So, dramatically, it did have problems for me.
But yeah, once he moves uptown, then she never sees him. She goes 6 months without seeing him.
Did you even understand what the situation was where he ends up killing the blind kid? Like, what? What exactly
he didn't
happened
kill
there?
him.
Well, he doesn't show up for the operation.
Yeah.
But he doesn't even seem to be aware that there's an operation. Like, what even happened there? She said she was going to talk to him.
Yeah, but she never talked to him. She talked
But
to
she sets up an operation to be performed at noon, and she's just going to call him up that day, and he's going to come within a few hours?
She talked to his staff, and they didn't prioritize it. Because he knows about it, right? Remember, he said, hey, there was a memo, I was supposed to do something at noon today. I remember seeing that, and it's not there, and it just got lost in the shuffle. But
he doesn't know what that is.
No, why would he? His appointments are made by his staff. That's what they're there for. And they screwed it up because it's not a paying customer anyway, presumably. It's like the lowest possible priority for them. He doesn't make it. But yeah, she can't get to him. That's the whole point. She tries to talk to him personally, and people that answer his phone for him do not transfer the calls. So the people that actually took down that appointment don't have any investment in whether it actually transpires or not. That is a terrible
And what
scene.
actually happens to the child?
Well,
Someone
we
else
don't know.
operates?
I don't know. They don't tell us. Needed something to be done quickly, presumably.
Yeah, I found all of that confusing and under-explained, so the melodrama there didn't really pay off for me.
Presumably, a less skilled surgeon handled the operation, and the little boy died. And this is a little boy that we had seen a few times before. He had such infinite trust in Felix. It all came to naught.
I mean, there's going to be a whole lot of heavy-hitting, guilt-tripping melodrama scenes in this movie, and that one didn't land for me.
Really? No, I thought that one was quite...
I mean, you're going to make me upset about a blind kid dying in a movie. Like, you better work at it. Trope is overused.
Okay. Well, the next major thing, obviously, is the father.
Yeah, no, this whole sequence of the movie is pretty amazing. I really woke up at this point. I'd been asleep since the end of the first scene. Maybe my favorite thing in the whole movie is, that first extended scene with the family.
Mm-hmm.
But this wasn't in the first scene. It was in a later scene, but when they're still on the Lower East Side maybe this was part of his routine, the actor, but where the father is picking caraway seeds.
Yeah.
Either that or it's a detail from the story. Picking caraway seeds out of his piece of bread.
Yeah.
To eat.
I like caraway seeds. There's a big celebration for the sister's kid.
This is, let's see, they have it here on Wikipedia. It is, I can't pronounce this correctly, but Pidyon Haben, the Jewish ritual redemption of the firstborn.
Everyone's there except Felix. He's detained at work, so they start without him. And he does show up halfway through the ceremony, so the whole family is gathered and all of their friends and loved ones. And then the father gives this incredible speech talking about how proud he is of every member of the family. And
because they're happy. That's important.
Exactly.
And that makes him so happy that if God could strike him dead, if God decided to strike him dead at that moment, that would be fine with him. Well, God takes him up on that.
Yeah, he collapses. Now, obviously, he must be feeling like this is a possibility. Presumably, he's been feeling bad for a while. He did actually seem like he might want to talk about health problems with Felix in the scene prior to that at the office. And here, yeah, he just collapses. And we don't know exactly, I mean, you think maybe it's a heart attack or something. That's the default assumption I have. But it's not. It's a tumor on the brain. So they determine that there's a chance
and if
it
you
could
think
be
that
fixed.
is only a melodrama device, I actually know someone who died of a brain tumor.
Yeah, no.
Family member.
Obviously
They
something
were very young, too.
that can happen. And
I'm sure blind children dying in operations also happens.
yes. It's a very fragile thing, the human form.
Life is melodramatic.
It is, unfortunately. So he meets with a bunch of other specialists because it makes sense to me when it's your father or someone really close to you, you may not feel like you are the best person to make such an important judgment.
Oh, this was terrible. This was so terrible.
Yeah, everyone agrees, yes, it's a brain tumor. And the father certainly everyone assumes that Felix will do the operation. And he is not so sure of that. He wants anyone else to do this.
You also know that besides the fact of operating on his father, he does feel like he's been removed from serious medicine for far too long.
Yeah, he may feel like he's a little out of practice. We don't know, though.
I think he does say something to that effect afterwards.
Yeah, we get the picture that certainly most of his days are spent with these frivolous concerns, at most prescribing pills and exercises maybe, or mantras or something. But he is, like, there are news stories about him, so he's still definitely doing operations because...
I guess. Again, you know what? Again, a mixture of, in this script, of over-communication and under-communication.
Because right when this happens, there's a magazine article out about him saying that he has $1 million hands. So he's certainly still performing operations, but maybe he's not as in trim as he'd like to be. He just does really high-profile ones occasionally. Who knows? In this case, he is quite concerned about having to take responsibility for keeping his own father alive on the operating table. But everyone just assumes he must do it. He is the best surgeon for the job.
It really did put me behind the wheel of this terrible car, which then crashes.
Yeah, because the extended operation scene...
And that was amazing, hey? The camera work there?
Yeah, it really puts you in the moment with them, watching all of the instruments and gauges, and when things just start to go completely into free fall.
And then the camera pulling back afterwards as everyone leaves the operating theater. Somebody just hug this guy, but that's not good protocol, so...
No, and he's left all by himself in the operating room. The body language is great there, and his eye acting is very good during the operation as well.
Sure.
Because that rising sense of panic, that is obviously not something he's familiar with. He's been so successful with these operations. They say that, he just recently did an operation on an 85-year-old woman, a similar one, and pulled her out of it, and obviously the percentage of survival for these operations are not good. So the movie does not make it seem like he made a mistake here.
No,
it
happens. It's just a terrible thing to happen to you with your own father.
Exactly.
And I thought it was very effective, the whole setup of the father saying, the way people try to make sense of life by saying things like, well, clearly I bought you your first pair of white gloves to protect your hands, those genius hands that would one day save your father's life.
Yeah.
It's all come full circle now.
But no, it doesn't always work out that way.
There's either no God or God has other plans.
Yes. And this is, as you say, this is the hang up the cape moment.
I will never practice medicine again.
No, it hurts too much, and he's pretty resolved about that.
And then I couldn't believe that this did a double magnificent obsession.
It did, yeah.
Oh, I couldn't believe that's even possible. If this short story has a double magnificent obsession in it, I gotta read this short story.
It kind of goes Magnificent Obsession one better, because...
Besides just doubling it?
Irene Dunne, her character has a major role in setting up the second Magnificent Obsession, right?
Well, so the father thing was just very effective, but this thing that happens with Dunne now is insane.
Yeah, like she's basically saying, I'm gonna
sacrifice my life to bring you back, potentially, to bring you back to your full genius doctor self.
Exactly.
I mean, that's love.
And reconnect you with our neighborhood that we both love.
And maybe we can also now have sex.
Maybe, yeah. So this is where Irene Dunne does get a chance to work some magic with this role. I think that she does a great job. Now, again, this is
I know, this was so ludicrous, I just couldn't.
No?
No, I know you'll go there no matter how far it goes every time, but I was just gawking at this ending.
No, I thought it was amazing. Now, she loves him that much. She's going to put herself entirely in his hands, which have been idle.
Knowing that he just fucked it up with his father, and that he's incredibly nervous.
She says, put me on the table. I'm jumping into the volcano. Can he pull me out? So Magnificent Obsession has nothing like that in it. It's all just...
No, I just mean two life-changing operations.
Yeah, but this is a more reciprocal one.
Sure.
And Irene Dunne, of course, is the person who has her sight restored in Magnificent Obsession.
The John Stahl.
Yeah, so...
I mean, her role, she doesn't have much of a role here, but it seems like it did almost, this must have just like set up her weepy career. It's involved in Backstreet, which is another Fannie Hurst story.
Yeah.
With Stahl, and then moves on to Lloyd C. Douglas with Stahl.
Yeah, this whole early 30s Irene Dunne is completely different from the late 30s screwball Irene Dunne.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that when we do the Kendall book.
We will. It's easy to forget she was also a major operetta star. So she had
not really on the screen other than Showboat, right?
She did a lot of musical roles. We'll see her in Roberta as well.
Okay. Yeah, I guess she did a few.
Yeah, she was most famous for that. I mean, she was in Showboat, for God's sake.
For God's sake.
It all works out.
Yeah, well, yeah. And even there's that whole scene with his family, even the brother, all crowding around him being like, buck up, guy. He was an old man. It's not your fault.
He was happy. He was ready.
He died thinking you were going to save him.
He was able to go at that point. Yeah. No, none of that's any consolation.
Of course not.
It's not a consolation, even if you're not the person that was operating while they were dying.
I mean, that's actually like really a traumatic thing to happen in the movie. That's going to be like a hole in my heart forever, like the ending of Applause now.
Yeah.
At least it doesn't end on that note.
No, it ends on this triumphant note where his confidence is restored, his civic sense is restored.
He's probably going to marry Irene Dunne.
Yeah, everyone is going to be happy, and hopefully the father is looking on contentedly.
If there is a God, and if there isn't, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
Alright, so we're talking about Age of Consent.
So here we're going to an entirely different...
This one is The Age of Consent. There's also the Michael Powell film, Age of Consent.
Right.
Not the same thing.
Not the same thing. Here we're going to an entirely different social strata and area of the country.
Oh, very much so.
Seems like Midwestern college town. They don't say exactly where it is. It doesn't really matter.
Neither of these movies really take cognizance of the Depression, unless Selznick thought he was making an analog filming a Fannie Hurst movie.
Sure.
Probably he did.
Yeah, the Depression basically was pretty much constant in the inner city, so...
Right.
Of course, it could always get worse, and it did in the early 30s, but still, economic conditions were none too good, no matter when you check in with people on the Lower East Side, so...
But this film, other than a kind of flippant reference, absolutely does not even attempt to deal with it in any way.
No, and these are the kinds of people that wouldn't have to deal with it, right? There were still rich kids going off to college.
No, I'm just talking about the studio and what the studio chose to do.
Yeah.
Now, this is one of, I guess Selznick had to green light every project going on. This seems Selznick-y in its choice of tackling a difficult subject for films, which he also did in Bill of Divorcement. He'd always wanted to make a film of that play, but the movies wouldn't touch it apparently because of the hereditary insanity theme.
Right.
From this title, I thought we were going to get a kind of naughty pre-code. Couldn't be further from the truth.
No,
it's a problem issues movie. But it's really good.
Oh, I loved it.
Because it's an actual really intense examination of youthful sexuality and sexual mores.
It's sort of following along some of the same lines of inquiry that we saw in After Tomorrow, the Borzage.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
The young couple that are deeply in love and can't really get married, or there are obstacles to them getting married. Do they have sex before wedlock, or do they just hang on?
Yeah, this is another very adult look at that kind of topic that you wouldn't expect from a movie made in 1932, but obviously that has to do with the producers and the directors.
Yeah, RKO again.
Yeah, but Fox is supposed to be the rube, and yet it had an equally sophisticated look at this topic.
Right, so Ethan Morden may be oversimplifying in his famous book. Here, we've got a few major characters. We've got Richard Cromwell. He is sort of the focal point, I guess. It's a love triangle of sorts, an emotion triangle.
So I knew Richard Cromwell from his performance in Jezebel, although I've seen him in other things. But, I mean, I was obsessed with that movie as a teenager, so that's where I remembered him from. He is such a callow little twit in that movie that I don't even register him in it as physically attractive. In this movie, it is clear that he is very physically attractive and looks like a young Jude Law. I loved him in this movie.
Great, and he was a star in the early 30s, and it just slipped away from him. As you say, by 1938, he's got a fairly thankless role as an idiot fan of George Brand's character.
He did have an alternative career as an artist, but unfortunately died quite young, at the age of 50, from liver cancer.
Awful. He is opposite Dorothy Wilson.
She also had a career that only lasted through the 30s.
Yeah.
Although she was in lots of movies, opposite big stars.
So we may come across her again. I feel like this is the first time I've taken note of her anyway.
She was good as well.
Arlene Judge, I loved.
She was wonderful. She had a career only, now this is sad, really only in B movies, considering that her final speech is what puts like the whole movie over. Like that's a real acting job she did there.
She was the best thing in the movie, I thought.
Yeah.
Although there were a lot of great things in it.
Yeah, I don't know. She just went straight into B movies. That's all she did, but I bet she was very good in them. Oh, she's in An American Tragedy. Oh, uncredited. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
She's probably one of the girls in the factory.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I saw that she was married to Wesley Ruggles, who is a very good director at Paramount. And then she was married
Obviously didn't help her.
No, she got divorced from him. She was married 7 times. I noticed that.
Good lord. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled for her as well.
And Eric Linden as Duke Galloway. We've seen him quite recently in Life Begins, and here he's
very overwrought in that movie. Here he is playing a completely different type of character.
Yeah, he winds up becoming quite lovable and has a really affecting death scene. He seems like a kind of weird version of like the Reggie Mantle character.
Yeah,
at the beginning.
And a potential date rapist.
Yeah, he turns into a great guy.
Now, he also has the accent of...
a Brooklyn kind of accent, a little bit.
Really? I thought it sounded like Leonardo DiCaprio's accent in The Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
Maybe flavored by Brooklyn.
Yeah. And he is the ultra-rich kid who's got a new Cadillac every time people look around. Then we've got John Halliday, who has a pretty important role in this film, and we know him best as Seth Lord from the Philadelphia Story, but he turns up all over the place in the 30s.
Yeah, know him and hate him.
Yeah, he's often quite a jerk, although not always.
He's a real sweetie in this movie.
Yeah, a mentor figure to Richard Cromwell, and he has a kind of B love plot with Eileen Pringle.
Who's Eileen Pringle? She didn't get much to do in this movie, but she was distinctive.
She's an English professor who had been engaged to Halliday, and they just sort of let it slip away from them. They're kind of a cautionary tale.
Her movie career started in 1920.
Well, that makes sense. She's, in her 40s in this movie. They're a bit of a reminder that if you don't act upon your romantic impulses at the right time, you could very easily wind up having to be a bachelor or spinster professor at a college in the middle of nowhere.
But she seemed she hardly had anything to do, but she seemed very attractively bohemian, and it turns out she was.
Yeah.
It says here on her Wikipedia page, she was often dubbed by the press as the darling of the intelligentsia because of her close friendship with such literary figures as Carl van Vechten, Joseph Hergesheimer, Rupert Hughes, and H.L. Mencken, who became a lifelong friend of the actress.
Cool. I liked her a lot as well, and she had a couple of nice scenes.
I wish she'd had a bigger role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The status quo at the beginning of this film is that Cromwell is in love with Betty. So his name is Mike. Mike is in love with Betty, but she is sort of reluctant to just become his steady romantic partner throughout the remaining years of college. She wants to enjoy her freedom.
Initially, that changes pretty quickly.
Yeah, after he throws a fit. I think it's quite reasonable. She's like, we can't get married. You're not allowed to get married and stay in college.
You're not?
Not really, no.
Oh, okay.
So nothing can happen for a few years, so we can keep lightly dating, but I'm also going to accept a car ride with Duke if he asks me to go. Because
Which he
why
does
not?
as he asks every other girl.
Mike is an old-fashioned romantic. He keeps asking everyone, doesn't anyone have ideals anymore?
Well, first of all, there's this whole montage at the beginning with lots of wipes. We were just talking about wipes still being used in early 30s movies.
Oh yeah, they're fairly common at this period.
In our last Setsuko Hara episode.
Yeah.
When we see him, he's supposed to be studying out on the lawn on, but he sees instead the image of Betty's face in the sky. So that gives us an idea of what he's like.
He is pretty focused on her, and he wishes she would focus a little bit more on him. Plot thickens when he throws a tantrum, declares a bit of an ultimatum. If you start taking rides with Duke, you can just forget about me.
Well, Duke is the fastest guy on campus. Then he has a little conversation with the professor about modern girls and changing times and honorable ideals. So at first you think the problem is maybe it's going to be like the Wild Party or something, and the problem is going to be the sexual mores of modern college girls.
Right. It's a kind of a different problem from that.
That was a red herring.
So we see him go to the local eatery where he sulks and keeps moving from booth to booth to get away from the sound of necking or battle of the sexes banter.
Well, the cute waitress starts flirting with him.
Arlene Judge comes over, and she clearly has a yen for him.
She makes it very clear.
Yeah, she senses that he may be ripe for the picking because he's not with the girl that he often pines for.
Right,
and
so she makes a play, but ultimately she realizes that he's nursing a broken heart and she's not going to get anywhere tonight.
Except that she tries to engineer an extra level of difficulty there. She sees Betty outside in Duke's car and draws Mike's attention to that fact so that there could be a kind of a blowout.
And Mike kind of imagines even more than he's been told.
Yeah, so he comes out and he just basically says, forget it,
and
do
Betty,
whatever you want. I wash my hands of you.
Betty is literally just sitting in the car.
Yeah, that's all she's doing.
It's not even clear she's actually going to go for a ride at this point.
Well, she says that she just met him to say that she wasn't going to take
It's true, but he's very persuasive, so we don't really know how this is going to go.
It's true.
Once Mike gives her directions to the necking point or whatever,
she says, oh great, I guess that's where we're going to go. But then they drive about 2 blocks and she gets out of the car and rushes back and lights into him.
Then picks an extended fight with him. So the screenplay writer that we know anything about here is Sarah Y. Mason, who with her frequent screenwriting partner, who was her husband, won the Academy Award for the Little Women screenplay.
Yeah, so she seems to have been an RKO mainstay in the early 30s at least, and maybe beyond.
These scenes of banter are all very charmingly
they are.
written.
She follows him into the men's room, which is quite something.
I mean, that already, for the time, quite pushing the envelope.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a very free code moment. I wouldn't think so, but Hitchcock couldn't even get a toilet on the screen until 1960.
Yeah,
so.
Of course, even mentioning such places. It all ends with she's got him over a barrel at this point. If they get caught together in that bathroom, they'll probably both be expelled from university.
Well,
so.
when they're kissing on the other side of the door, she insists, he doesn't want to kiss her, but she insists that he has to kiss her before she'll get out of the bathroom. It's a pretty sexy kiss, and at this point you do realize that she is very into him, not just romantically, but also sexually. Cava manages to make all of this very clear, that they are both sexually and romantically very into each other.
Yeah, that kind of settles.
Which is unusual, of course, on the woman's side for films of this period, unless, she's a whore.
Oh, well.
Unless she's Jean Harlow. Well, Jean Harlow actually doesn't have any sexual feelings in most of Red-Headed Woman, not until she meets the chauffeur.
Not in Red-Headed Woman, no, but most of her movies, yes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. Unless
she's a sociopath in
Red-Headed
Woman.
quote-unquote whore, yeah.
So it all ends with her asking for his pin, and that means they're going steady and they're on the road to possibly getting engaged or married. But that can't happen again for many years because they're only halfway through their college career. And if they want to finish...
Well, 2 years. It's said several times.
Well,
2 years.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're young and you haven't had sex, because it's made pretty clear that he has not had sex either.
No, they're stuck in this holding pattern, and it really is presented as a choice. If you want to get the education you need to get a real leg up in the professional world, you have to forego love and marriage.
Not really, because, for some people maybe, but for him, it is made clear that he has someone who can give him a good job at any point. It's just that he had higher goals for himself than simply getting a job.
I'm not saying that you can't get a job. For people in this class strata, sure, there's always a job, because there's the money to send them to college, so there's also connections to get you a job. But if you want to actually become a scientist, feminist or something, which
Yeah.
it seems like he wanted to do.
Seems
Well,
like
that's
it.
not going to happen.
Now that part, again, is not explored. This time around, this is not the feminist studio for careers,
No.
for career women.
Well, it's just not, it doesn't matter for anybody's career, really. Career is like second best, right? Because the professors, they chose their fields over love, and they're kicking themselves at the end of this movie, and maybe they're going to fix it. And I guess they can stay teaching and married because they're...
It's true, but the dilemma when they discuss it is him giving up his career and the goals he had set for himself, not her, even though she's also going to leave college.
Right. Well, you have to remember, it's quite explicit in a lot of movies, but not in this one. But women generally in this class strata went to college to meet a nice young man,
Of
to
course,
get married.
I was thinking about that watching the movie and how it suggests that it wasn't that different, in fact, for the men.
Well, no, everyone's supposed to, but you're just supposed to do it at the end of the 4 years,
Right.
not in the middle.
But such inconvenient situations, if everyone is planning to get married, must have happened a lot.
Sure, and consent laws,
Well, that's going to come up.
they do play into this.
Not in the way they're talked about on college campuses now, though.
No, it's a very different kind of, it seems to mainly happen when townies get involved. Did you notice the in loco parentis engraving on the bench behind them when they're having their big talk?
No.
You know what that is, right? Like the college
Yes, in place of the parents. And now
Yeah.
with their, perhaps in some instances, over-administrating of the sex lives of the students again in a completely different way, coming from completely different interest groups, they are still acting in loco parentis.
Right.
Whether the students like it or not.
But yeah, presumably Duke is having sex, or he says he's having sex with people all over the place, right? And nothing is...
Well, one of the big ironies here is that once he puts the pin on her, the idea is, well, we saw this also in After Tomorrow. If you're going to get married, that's when you can't have sex with each other.
Right. Right.
Because you're going to, have a respectable relationship with each other.
Yeah. The other thing is that in loco parentis is important because the college is the stand-in parent for all these people, and the college is not going to press charges against anyone no matter what happens in general, it seems, just for having consensual romantic relation. But what can happen is if you go outside of those boundaries and wind up sleeping with a waitress who has a parent at home, not a good parent, but a parent.
Well, he turns out to be okay.
He's okay, but he's not part of this whole unwritten law that nobody's going to press charges against anybody.
Well, that now everybody presses charges against
Yeah, I know.
everybody.
It's a different world now. And it's not so good. Who knows?
All that we know is that the sex lives of college students are still a mess.
Yeah, we can't sort that out.
Despite the modernization of sexuality.
2020, I don't even really want to comment on 2020.
I apparently do.
1932, that's the way parental regime was worked out.
We saw over-policing of the girls' sexuality in Dorothy Arzner's The Wild Party.
Yeah, we did. We did.
So obviously some of that is going on. Like, there are certain expectations set by mentors and boards. Like, Clara Bow's sexuality is policed by the board of the college.
Yes,
in that
but I
movie.
want you to remember that they throw her out of college. They don't have her thrown in jail.
No, and
They
that's still
don't bring
happening.
the police in.
That's still happening. Like, when these issues come up of consent
Yeah.
within universities between students now, you are thrown out of college.
Yeah, but that's what I want to emphasize, because this movie gets into what happens when you stray beyond the
No, I
campus
see.
grounds.
No, I see what you're saying. I'm just bringing up related things. We didn't mention that part of the banter he's having with the waitress is discussing their class differences, and she talks about her options in the town, which are either to go out with men of his class who are just trying to get laid,
Yeah.
or men of her own class who just don't have any prospects.
No,
So
and-
better to be a waitress, she basically says.
Yeah, and she does have a quick wit and
Mhm.
an interest in conversation, which nobody is engaging with her on. Nobody is taking her up on that. So the best she can find is Mike, it seems. Now, it does make it clear that he's not in love with her, obviously, because he is obsessed with Betty, and she's not really in love with him. She just just likes hanging out with him and trading barbs with him a bit.
And she knows he's not like one of these other college guys like Duke who are just going to treat her like a piece of meat. And can I emphasize that he's really good looking?
Yeah, sure, yeah. The movie takes a bunch of surprising turns.
Oh, it sure does.
Again, we get some after tomorrow type discussions between Betty and Mike where it seems like they've kind of settled it, that they're going to wait, they're going to get to the end of this college obstacle course.
It's at the dance where they go off onto the lawn and start doing some heavy petting and getting all excited and also have a discussion about their futures.
Which is they can hang on, they can do it, and they're not going to let it fall apart. But that's bravado, it turns out to be, because Mike crumbles that very night.
As soon as Mike realizes that he has committed himself to not having sex for another 2 years, and he's also really aroused by the fact that he's engaged the woman he's in love with.
Yeah, then he goes to the diner.
Alone.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want any more temptation from her.
And runs right into Arlene Judge.
Now from this point, things get really interesting.
Yeah.
About sexual mores and motives. Because I started thinking, well, is he going to think that he can use this lower class girl as a whore because she is of a class that he doesn't have to concern himself with her virtue? And, like, how is that going to pan out for both of them? Well, this is what we find out.
The film does itself a favor in terms of preserving his likability by kind of removing a lot of his agency through alcohol.
Well, not initially.
No, I mean, he does agree to go home with her, but we don't really know. He doesn't seem to be intending to actually have sex with her.
But what's he intending? I mean, it's not an intention.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, am I blaming the victim here? Because she's making it very obvious what she would like, every step along the way, and he is taking each step, I mean, it's kind of clear what's going to happen, even if he's not letting himself think about it.
True, but it really does feel more like it's not premeditated. It's
not premeditated sex.
No, and not premeditated
third degree
usage.
Third degree sex.
Right. They just go home. Father's not there. He's always out till all hours, and they drink his moonshine. This is still prohibition.
Right. We talked about that.
It's way stronger than either of them seems to be expecting.
In the last episode of this series.
And honestly, we don't even know if they were even able to have sex after all of that.
As often in movies from this period, we are given completely conflicting clues, which is they wake up in their clothes, which makes it look like they didn't, but she talks to him like they definitely did.
Right.
And he doesn't remember anything.
No.
So we and he have plausible deniability
right.
that we saw sex.
Again, he's not treating her callously when he decides he has to leave.
Well, he's very uncomfortable. He's not nice. He's very uncomfortable.
But in a way that is not driven by malice in any way.
No, but he's not what she wanted him to be the next day.
No, but I don't know what she wanted him to be.
Well, that's the other thing. What are her motives here?
Exactly. Like, she doesn't...
I wondered if she was hoping to, again, in a not entirely premeditated way, but almost in an unconscious way, hoping to entrap him by having sex with him, and then he'll find out that he likes her. Clearly she wants to have sex with him. And again, this is presented in a very unusual fashion, which is that women don't, as they often do in movies of this time, aren't just using sexuality as a weapon, but want to have sex.
Yeah, that was the way I interpreted it. That she just thought
But she doesn't want there to be not a relationship. She's not Duke. Like, she likes him, so she wants a relationship to develop out of this, and I guess assumes that if he goes along with having sex with her, that's going to happen.
Yeah, probably, but I don't think, she doesn't seem like it's the be-all and end-all of her life. If he doesn't follow up on it, it's going to destroy her or anything like that.
No, it's not presented that melodramatically, no. But you feel like she likes him and she wants something to develop, as well as wanting to have sex with him.
Sure. And now all of that goes out the window because the father's standing there with smoldering fury on his face.
In lieu of a shotgun.
Yes. He lays down the law and explains that he will be bringing the law into the proceedings.
Okay, so this is the next thing. What the heck kind of age of consent law is this? Like, they don't look... I did not know was a minor. I didn't know. She's working as a waitress. She looks the same age as the college girls. And he can't be more than 3 or 4 years older than her. What kind of law is this? this.
Yeah, I don't know if he's even older than her. I don't know what the laws were at that time. It might be anyone under 21.
Oh,
if
21.
someone wants to press charges, if a parent wants to press charges, they can create a problem for you. That's, I think, the intention of these laws. So that's why you have all these shotgun marriages, because there is the force of law behind the demand that something be done about
Because
this.
age of consent laws dipped, like, they were all over the place, and they dipped very low in various places at various times. Like, I was looking them up just for, okay, when I was growing up in Manitoba, I assumed and talked things over with parents and peers to the effect that the age of consent was 18. But I looked it up recently, and apparently it was 14.
Right.
And with a proviso that you couldn't consent to sex with someone who was your teacher or a coach or someone in a position of authority over you. But it didn't seem to have any of those age gap provisos that are sometimes there, that you could have sex within your peer group within about 5 years, but not 10 years. These laws are often very complicated.
Yeah, we don't get a look at the statute book in this film, but you have to remember, if the college is in loco parentis, that means that a parent is involved in decisions regarding the sexuality of the college students. So if they fall under the rubric of minors, then certainly so does Arlene Judge, right? And that's the logic that seems to be in force here.
But a minor can have sex with a minor and that's a crime? Because
Yes.
Normally that's not the case.
No, I think it was, if a parent wanted to make an issue of it.
Okay, well that's weird.
That's obviously what they're saying in this movie. I don't know how universal that is or how many states this was actually a fact
Well,
in.
normally if a minor has sex with a minor, it's not a crime now, as far as I know.
Yeah, now.
Within my own adolescence to the present, as far as I know.
Yeah, I don't know, but this film doesn't make it seem like that's the case, because...
Well, unless, of course, the minors are, again, distributed on either side of puberty. But...
Yeah, but none of that is referred to or at all relevant for this movie. It's just, you guys had sex, and the parent, Mr. Swale, wants to make an issue of it, so it is. You're gonna go to jail unless I decide not to press charges. The only way I won't press charges is if you marry my daughter, because she's ruined now for anyone else. That's basically how he puts it all.
Sure, and what we think is being posited here is a tension between this working class moron and the sophisticated scientific university. In fact, that is, right now, the tension that is present in the film. Luckily, it doesn't end on that note.
No, it does feel at that moment like it's going to be a basket of deplorables kind of argument,
yeah, exactly.
and that's it.
We think that might be the way RKO, the studio that it is going to go, the audience that it's looking for.
Yeah, they're looking for the sophisticated New York audience. The sheriff, or the police interlocutor, he says, unfortunately, I have to enforce a lot of laws I don't agree with, and this is one of them. I hope that we can resolve this, right? So he makes it very clear that these police, what they try to do is get people to not press charges so they don't have to worry about this fucking nonsense. Mr. Swale is inconsolable and cannot be reasoned with.
Of course, I'm looking at Dora this whole time, and her father's very overbearing, and for all we know, he could be a violent working class father stereotype. We're not given information one way or the other. He's intimidating.
And he's drunk a lot, apparently.
Right. So she's sitting there quietly. She makes a gesture and does some face acting that lets us know that she is absolutely not trying to entrap him into marriage.
No, she's disgusted with all of this.
So I'm just waiting to see if she's going to ever stand up to her father and take some goddamn responsibility, because this was her idea, and there is no significant age difference, if any, here. So...
Right.
take some goddamn responsibility, but I'm also feeling kind of bad for her in this whole situation.
Yeah, it's not an easy... She has to hear it stated out loud, even though I'm sure she probably knows this. It's still not pleasant to hear in official settings with everyone listening in. He says point blank, we don't love each other.
And also,
what kind of basis for marriage is this?
Having it advertised that she had sex out of wedlock, she knows she's not supposed to be doing that.
No.
There's a lot of social opprobrium there.
It's all terrible, but really there's no option here. He does not want to go to jail, so he has to marry Dora. And now
also he is an honorable guy, although he doesn't think his life should be signed away for one drunken night of something he doesn't remember.
No. And even worse, almost as bad as going to jail is going to be telling Betty about this. Mm-hmm. But he does face up to that responsibility.
And it's a pretty bad scene.
Yeah, it's very upsetting.
So then we get some more uncharacteristic character stuff, some more surprising character stuff when Duke shows up to be the shoulder for her to cry on.
Yeah, so she resolves to go to the devil, and Duke is the quickest route there. She wants to get into the car with him and go off somewhere and just commit crimes. And since there's no parent that's going to get involved, she'll be okay, at least legally. But Duke, he's seen it all. He knows what's going on here, and he's not going to just facilitate this decision she will regret immediately.
Yeah, he'll take advantage of a fast girl, but not a vulnerable girl.
Right. And, we could quibble with Duke on that. Reifying of good and bad girls.
His chivalry.
He says, to be bad, you really have to be born bad. Now.
Well, a sentence like that, obviously we're not supposed to agree with it.
No, of course
it's
not.
It's a character statement.
Yeah. So Duke, in theory, he's all wrong.
But he definitely thinks he's been born bad.
Yeah.
This is primarily applying to himself at that moment, I think.
Yeah. And bad just means violating these
norms.
Yeah, that really are no longer even valid today. So how bad is that, really? He's not someone who is an advocate for, mistreating women. He just wants to find the ones that want to have sex with them, even if there is a social stigma attached to it.
Sure.
Now, he knows that that's not really Betty. So he says, I'll take you for a picnic and you can cry on my shoulder and all of this will pass. You'll figure out something else.
But what you always have to have in a teen soap opera, and apparently it's already a rule in 1932, is you have to have a car crash.
Yeah, but it's so terrible. Like, they're not even drinking or anything, right? Like,
we have no idea where this came from.
It's just, they were going to get milk, he said. So the wedding is...
It's just the plot calls for it.
Yeah, the wedding's about to take place and they get a phone call that there's been a terrible accident involving Duke and Betty. Everyone has to rush off to the hospital, momentarily putting off the wedding. And Betty is hurt, but only slightly. It still looks like it's going to be a bit of a convalescence for her. She's got a broken arm, maybe, or something, but she is not in a life-threatening situation. Duke, however, he's got some mortal head wound that is going to put him out for the count.
He's got those melodrama injuries that John Garfield has in Four Daughters, where you can make a touching speech and then quietly expire right after. He's not hooked up to anything, any vital signs.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how that works, but presumably, yeah, if you get the wrong kind of head injury and you've got bleeding inside your brain...
But you can talk very coherently and cogently right up until the end.
Maybe. Anyway, in the movie, that's how it works. Everyone's gathered around, and Duke has a very touching farewell with the professor, with Mike mostly looking on. He's not really interacting with Duke that much, but he's feeling it.
I can't do melodrama death scenes anymore. Of this type, of this completely implausible type. My brain just won't let me. They were like my favorite thing when I was a teenager. But
really?
I can't do it anymore. I can't accept it. My stupid rational brain is just overworking.
This one took me by surprise. I really found it quite affecting.
But right after Dora's speech got me.
She's looking on. She sees Mike. She knew about how much he cared about Betty already, but seeing him when he's unsure about her status and he goes in to maybe say his farewell to her if she's dying, everyone understands that they should be together. And Dora...
even the father, seeing all of this youthful death and carnage, seems very shaken up.
Yeah, it has a major impact on him.
Yeah.
But by himself, he might not have done anything. Dora has to take charge of the scene, and she does. She really does set everything to rights.
Right before the wedding, we have seen her express distress that she's going to have to move to California. That was not in her plans.
Yeah, 3,000 miles.
Yeah.
She's not interested in that.
She apparently likes her town.
Yeah, so for it to be 3,000 miles away...
And we find out she likes her father.
Yeah, she wants her father to be more of a presence in her life.
This is why she's gone a little astray, because she doesn't have anyone
to talk to at home.
Parental supervision or love in her life.
Yeah, so that...
No mother. We see how that works, A Miracle of Morgan's Creek.
Yeah, it really really comes to a very satisfying conclusion, and Arlene Judge carries all of the weight of it, and magnificently.
She talks about, a few characters have talked about this in the course of the movie, but about the arbitrariness of right and wrong.
Yeah.
What is considered right and wrong. And she talks about the senselessness of Duke's death, right? How that couldn't possibly be right. There's no right in this world.
No, he was doing something good for once, and now he gets struck by lightning. It makes no sense.
And it can't be right for me to do something that I know is wrong, which is this marriage.
Yeah, the argument from authority, she rejects it 100%, and her father, who has been trying to push this argument from authority on her whole life, finally has to agree that he doesn't know where these moral strictures are coming from. They were just imposed on him, and it's time for everyone to just get a little distance from it all and do the right thing emotionally rather than based on obsolete moral codes.
So the intergenerational rapprochement is much more satisfying here than in After Tomorrow.
Oh yeah, they are actually going to forge some kind of household for a while anyway, until she actually gets married.
Yeah.
To someone that she wants to marry. We do end the movie with the two lovebirds on their way to California, and the older generation...
the even older generation.
Yeah, they may get married themselves, who knows?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they are older than the father. They just look very professorial.
Yeah, they're...
They're probably the same age.
Yeah, they're the same generation,
Yeah.
anyway. So, really good movie. Age of Consent.
Yeah, I love that.
The Age of Consent.
It was great. Everybody was great in it.
So check it out. I guess that's it for this week.
That's it.
1932.
What's next week?
RKO in the books.
What can we say about it? RKO. What was paired with After Tomorrow again at Fox?
Me and My Gal.
Right. Both of those studios' double features that we saw were actually extremely good on female sexuality. I'm sure we're going to see many more atrocious things on gender as we go along, but that's the thing. You can never make generalizations about quote-unquote classic movies, even specifically studio-era Hollywood movies. Never make generalizations like, oh, it's an old movie, so of course its gender politics are bad. No. A lot of the time, especially with better-known producers, directors, writers, the gender politics are excellent, as good as or better than any we have now. And a lot of the time in movies now, I'm pretty sure, I don't watch them, but I'm pretty sure the gender politics are terrible. You know, no generalizations here, and no excuses when the gender politics are terrible. Don't just say it's just an old movie. Criticize them, whether you like the movie or not.
And do you have any feelings about La Cava after seeing these two films back to back?
They're two wildly different movies with wildly different styles. So, I feel like Symphony of 6 Million, he's probably being smothered in Selznick sauce.
Yeah, I think that does make sense. That one didn't feel so much like a La Cava movie. The Age of Consent, I feel like it did have more of...
homey and intimate and real exploration of sexual mores. I mean, it goes along with Primrose Path, which is another that I've seen of his.
I think The Age of Consent falls...
another drama I've seen of his.
...more easily into my conception of the La Cava oeuvre, and I think you're probably right. Symphony of 6 Million is
that
more...
That belongs to the Selznick mixed bag of oeuvre. Often great, but this one, for me, mixed.
Next week seems likely to be a very big episode, because we are doing Ritwik Attack's Partition Trilogy.
Oh, is that next week?
Three
Holy
big
man.
films.
It's gonna be exciting.
We're gonna have to block off more of our Sunday for that.
And more of your editing time, Dave.
Yes.
All right, well, be there for sure.
See you next week.